Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my video all about Monica Rambeau's powers on Wandavision, the way they've explained her in the MCU, her origin story, and some of the changes from the comics, and what they're going to be doing with her in the future of the MCU, because she is super OP in the comics. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. I'll be doing videos for all the Marvel Disney Plus series this year. Falcon Winter Soldier is going to be up after WandaVision. We got a couple more episodes, so we're almost at the finale. But big spoiler warning if you have not been watching the WandaVision episodes, because we'll be talking about everything that's happened so far. So during episode 7, she goes through the Hex barrier a third time, and that's what Darcy said would scramble her DNA beyond recognition, turn her into a completely different person on a genetic level, aka mutate her, everyone hearing the X-Men theme playing softly in the background. But technically, she's not a mutant in the comics, she's a mutate, which is a slightly different thing. In order to be called a legit mutant, you have to be born that way. So, for example, Wiccan and Speed, Billy and Tommy, the twins, were born with their powers, so they are legit mutants in the MCU. But she's crazy powerful in the comics. She's gone by several different code names based on what they were doing with her during various eras of the comics. We'll get into that in a second. What's more important, though, is how they're setting her up on the show and the way they're using her powers on the show. But as she pushes her way through the Hex barrier and it starts changing her, the way they visualize her origin story is meant to be a very 2001 Space Odyssey type of sequence, where you see her phase shifting, you see reality warping around her, all while she's being bombarded by voices from the past, like scenes from the hospital in episode 4 when she got snapped back by the Hulk. You probably heard Brie Larson's voice as Captain Marvel. That was a scene directly from the Captain Marvel movie where she was a little girl talking to her about meeting her halfway to outer space, like she wanted to go help her out and go on adventures with her. Which obviously now is important because pretty soon she'll be able to fly just like Captain Marvel and literally meet her halfway up to outer space. In the comics, the way she got her powers is she was bombarded with energies from all kinds of different dimensions by a Roxxon scientist who was trying to tap into extra-dimensional energy as an alternative power source. Remember, that's also where Doctor Strange's magic powers come from. He pulls energy from other dimensions to power his spells and enchantments. Technically, what he's doing, though, when he weaves spells, is allowing him to tap into those extra-dimensional energies. You also notice as she's phase shifting here, she starts warping around her. You see the different versions of her from different parts of her timeline. When they start overlapping, you start to see versions of her comic book costume. There's a bit of an Easter egg there. And obviously when she comes out and she's wearing this outfit, this is meant to be the modernized version of her comic book outfit, the black and white one. So they kind of try to give you as comic booky a version of her origin story as possible, at least a lot of Easter eggs for that comic book origin. But when she emerges from the barrier inside the Hex, her eyes glow blue with energy and she starts seeing the entire electromagnetic spectrum of the Hex. That's basically what this is as she's peering around. It's like Neo seeing the Matrix, seeing reality for what it really is. She's getting all this extra visual information, and one of her basic powers, it's a bit of a passive power in the comics, is the ability to analyze and replicate all forms of energy. There are a couple qualifiers for that, there are a couple limitations on her abilities, but when her eyes are glowing blue like this, it's them showing you her body analyzing the normal electromagnetic spectrum. Then later when Scarlet Witch blasts her and she soaks some of the energy damage, then she puts her in the telekinetic hold up in the air and drops down, doing the classic superhero landing. She gives off that blue energy discharge. What's happening is that first blast of red Scarlet Witch energy, her body was analyzing and adapting to it, but it's not instantaneous. It takes her a minute to be able to process and understand that kind of information. Then when she drops down, her body is just instinctually absorbing and radiating some of that kinetic energy of the impact with the ground, and Scarlet Witch's energy. It's the exact same concept with Black Panther's vibranium suit. He absorbs energy and then can later discharge it as a burst or focused blast. There aren't any real limitations on what they can do with that sort of energy. It's just a matter of them being creative with how they use it. But Monica's powers go way beyond that, but she's still learning how to use them on the show right now, like she's still fresh out of the barrier. Like all Marvel character arcs, they tend to evolve all the characters' powers with each new movie, learn more creative uses for them. Like Thor is a really good example. Thor during Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Infinity War becoming a much more powerful version of himself because he was learning more about how his powers really worked. He was always that powerful, it's just that he never understood his powers up to that point in Ragnarok. Later during the post-credit scene, we get another similar type of moment following up on that, where rewatching this a couple more times in context, I actually do think that she opens the cellar door to Agatha Harkness's basement and sees the purple glowing vines of energy. Then you zoom and enhance, her eyes start glowing purple, and she gets caught by Evan Peters' character. It's probably the same situation as before. Her body is instinctively just detecting Agatha Harkness's purple magical energy, and she's in the process of adapting to it. So eventually, if Agatha Harkness tries to mess with her or mind control her, it probably won't work the way it worked on Scarlet Witch. Because remember earlier in the episode when Scarlet Witch walked down into the creepy basement, she just saw the normal looking vines, no energy radiating off of them the way Monica did. That's because that's probably what the basement looks like to just normal people, but Monica is seeing it with her Spectrum eyes, so to speak, like her Spectrum name in the comics, and seeing the power literally flowing through them. Her eyes turn purple just because it's the color of the energy she's detecting, and they want you to make that connection like, oh, purple vines, purple eyes, detecting purple energy. So eventually, just like in the comics, she'll be able to eventually defend herself much more readily against Agatha Harkness's powers. Maybe even, given enough time, give off blasts like that as well. That gets into more of her complex powers in the comics. I'll talk about that in a second, because it's really cool. She is a super OP character in the comics. But on the show, you probably noticed that everybody has a different color for their powers. Scarlet Witch's powers are red, even though Agatha Harkness has the exact same magical abilities, her powers are purple. Vision has yellow powers because of the Mind Stone. Tommy is kind of blurry, running with the Quicksilver effects. Then Billy's magical energy, even though his powers are the exact same as Scarlet Witch's and probably Agatha Harkness's, his are bluish like Monica Rambeau's. The reason why they do that is just on a practical level. When they have their inevitable battle royale in the finale, full-blown wizard battle, you'll be able to follow the action a little bit easier. If everyone had the same color of powers, it just get a little confusing when it started getting super crazy on screen. But Monica is effectively now made of pure energy. She can turn into an energy form and travel at the speed of light. She becomes energy itself. She doesn't just give it off in blasts or use it to fly. That's why she's so crazy OP. Like at one point in the comics, she even turned into electromagnetic energy and flew right through Magneto's shield to beat the crap out of him. She even turned into gamma energy and fought the She-Hulk to a standstill. The limitation, though, on her powers is that yes, while she can replicate and control any form of energy, she has to be able to understand that form of energy. So if she encounters somebody else who's wielding power from another dimension with some brand new energy source, she might get hurt during their first fight, but given enough time, if she were able to learn how that energy form worked, she could replicate it herself. That's why if Agatha Harkness blasted her with her purple magical energy, she would probably get hurt, but if you gave her enough time, like we'll probably see during the episodes, she'd be able to defend herself much more easily against it. The other cool thing about that is that it technically makes her stronger than Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel in the MCU got her powers from the Space Stone and Infinity Stone, but because of the way Monica's powers work, she goes way beyond that. She can replicate Captain Marvel's power and use other powers as well. She can make herself invisible by bending light around her body and use that same trick to also make herself look like other people. So it's kind of like there's no limit to the abilities that she has, the way she can use her energy. It's more about her taking the time to learn the science of it all and finding creative uses for her powers. There was even a scene in the comics that she had with Blue Marvel during Ultimates where they're nerding out having that same Thanos argument, like who could kill Thanos faster, like they had earlier on the show. And she actually gives Blue Marvel a version of the Thanos meme argument. Remember all the Ant-Man Thanos memes? Why doesn't he just fly up his butt and then make himself big and explode Thanos from the inside? Monica's version of that would be turning herself into pure energy and then flying through Thanos' brain at the speed of light, faster than Thanos would be able to react. There's also this really cool multiverse aspect to the way her powers work too, just explaining what is happening when she's using her abilities. So in the way they explain magic in the MCU, it's basically sorcerers pulling energy from other dimensions to power their spells. What happens when Monica is actually using her powers to blast someone or turn into pure energy or travel at the speed of light is that her mind is actually traveling to another dimension and she's effectively remote piloting her own physical body. They're kind of doing the same thing with Scarlet Witch on Wandavision, developing her character, explaining her powers in a better way. So, oh, you thought she was powerful. No, once you understand how her powers really work, she's way more powerful than you ever thought that she was. That's what we're getting into with all the House of M reality warping stuff that's going on inside the Hex. But getting into future WandaVision episodes, the MCU, Captain Marvel 2, and other Marvel projects that are coming up, right now her powers are still brand new. She doesn't totally understand how they work. so she'll probably just be immune to Agatha Harkness's mind control in the show and be able to help Scarlet Witch escape, and then during their big final battle, give off some huge power blasts, maybe fly a little bit. We also have the Nick Fury Secret Invasion series coming up next year with all the Skrulls, and because the Skrulls and Nick Fury are so tied up in the Captain Marvel story within the MCU, and Nick Fury is so connected to S.W.O.R.D. like he's on the S.W.O.R.D. space station with all the Skrulls during the Spider-Man Far From Home post-credit scene, we might also see Monica Rambeau show up in cameo during the Secret Invasion series. And just talking about some of the teasers for Captain Marvel 2 that we saw them laying some track work in the earlier episodes, they kept repeating voiceover dialogue from Brie Larson in the Captain Marvel movies, speaking to her when she was a little girl. But when Jimmy Woo and Darcy are nerding out with her about who's the most powerful person, Scarlet Witch taking down Thanos, what about Captain Marvel 2? Like they mention her name, she gets really pissed off. Like they're trying to imply there's some huge drama between the two of them that they'll get into during the sequel. And now that she has powers too, they could actually duke it out a little bit. Like Monica Rambeau could also adapt to and replicate Captain Marvel's powers. Based on the way they set it up during the episodes, it sounds like the drama between them might have something to do with Captain Marvel just never coming back to planet Earth between the events of the first movie in Avengers Endgame. Like they had that scene during Endgame where Rocket is clowning on her for not being around to help out more. She's like, I'm busy over here, I have space problems, I'm over in Kree Skrull space, I'm too busy for your Earth problems. Their drama will probably be more complicated than that, but her absence while Monica was growing up at S.W.O.R.D. all those years is probably a big part of it. But explaining a little more of the history of the character, because she was the original female Captain Marvel, like she was a version of Captain Marvel long before Carol Danvers. What happened is when they introduced her in the comics in the early 80s, she actually debuted during Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16. She debuted in a Spider-Man comic book of all places. She was introduced as Monica Rambeau and wound up getting her powers, and they were going to introduce her as the next version of Captain Marvel because they had killed off Mar-Vell, the original version of the character. She's had a bunch of other comic book names like Spectrum, Photon, the Lady of Light, Pulsar, Sun Goddess, but I'm assuming the name that they're going to go with in the MCU will either be Spectrum or Photon. Most of the versions of her comic book costume, though, look kind of like this color scheme with the black and white. They've just been various versions of this, just updated throughout the years in the comics. I'm assuming when they do get to Captain Marvel 2, they will give her a full-blown super suit, and it'll just be a shinier, better version of her color scheme here. But hopefully that explains a little bit about her origin story on the show and the MCU, how that's different from the comics, and what her powers are exactly and how they work. Everyone let me know in the comments though, where else do you want to see her show up in the future of the MCU projects, just beyond Captain Marvel 2? Which other movies do you want to see them put her in? My full Wandavision episode 8 video will post this Friday, but there'll probably be a couple of bonus videos before then. Leave all your requests in the comments below. Everyone click here for my Wandavision episode 8 trailer in that post-credit scene, and click here for my full Wandavision episode 7 video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight.